Okay, we're ready. Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting, Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors, November 9th, 2022. If you'll all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Division 1,
Here.
Division 2,
Here.
Division 3, here, Division 4, here, Division 5.
Here. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will take public comment on any items not on the agenda today. If you'd like to comment on items pertinent to NID business, now's your chance to speak up. If you're watching on Zoom, that's a *9 on your phone, or come to the podium if you're in the audience. Let's see, we have a hand with a phone number ending 3219. Go ahead. That's a *6 to unmute yourself. There you go.
Good morning, Tracy Sheehan with the Foothills Water Network.
Morning.
Good morning. I'm commenting this morning because I understand that it's Director Peters' last meeting on the NID board. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I want to thank Director Peters for her service all of these years. Of course, there are so many things to thank you for, but one that I want to focus on in particular is the solutions for Hemp Hill Dam removal. The Hemp Hill issue languished for years, as many people know, and Laura provided much needed leadership, and her understanding of the engineering solutions was really helpful. In particular, Director Peters worked with stakeholders, the tribes, NGOs, to talk about what potential solutions could happen at Hemp Hill. And she was successful in doing that. So I really appreciate your work there. Thank you. There are many other things that Laura did on the board, but I think overall what I really appreciate was her strategy to really take a deep dive into different issues. Another one that comes to mind right now has to do with an agricultural committee that was looking at rates, and Laura and others that were involved with that really had to dig in and educate themselves on what some potential solutions would be. Even though they never came to, I don't remember anything specific in terms of policy remedies, they certainly put in the work. And so thank you, Director Peters. Thank you for your years of service. Really appreciated it.
Tracy, anybody else like to comment on items not on the agenda today? *9 on your phone. All right, we will move on to special order, investment portfolio review, item 3A. On this morning.
I can kick it off, President Beerwagen. I believe we have Allison from PFM on the phone. I'm not sure if Monique is also on the phone. I don't see her. Is Allison here?
Yeah, Allison is here, and it's just me today.
Oh, perfect. All right. Well, we'll turn it over to you since you are the expert. Allison is going to provide a quarterly update on our investments.
Okay. Good morning, Allison. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, and thank you all. Yeah, my name is Allison County. I have not had the pleasure of attending one of your board meetings yet since we began working with the district earlier this year, although I have been working in the background on the district portfolio since our engagement started. So it is a pleasure to be here to meet with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let me just move that. And all right, can you all see that, the cover page of the report there?
That's great.
Okay, great. So I have pulled up here your quarterly report for the quarter ended September 30th. And as we typically do, I'll just start with a brief market update, kind of talking about what happened during the quarter in the economy with interest rates. So it likely won't be a surprise to anyone when you hear me say that inflation, sustained high inflation, continues to be a major concern impacting the US economy and the markets, both the bond market where we invest the district's funds, as well as the stock markets. Inflation has been elevated for some time now, and the latest consumer price index reading showed that prices increased by 8.2% year over year as of September. The housing market has recently slowed considerably, really driven by high mortgage rates that are now near or above 7%. The consumer, that would be you and me, has continued to spend, and consumer spending does remain a positive contributor to GDP. But with the spending, with increased costs, we are see that savings accounts have declined and that credit card balances are increasing. With all of this, we do see that the economic outlook has worsened, and the probability of a recession sometime over the next year continues to grow. This is in spite of a very strong labor market, a labor market showing us unemployment below 4% and impressive job growth each month.
Allison, we have a quick question.
Oh, yeah, please.
Hi, Allison. Rich Johansson. On this labor market, so my understanding, there's 9 million jobs out there. There's 7 million people not looking. And there was a 270,000, 260,000 new hires this past September. But when they started calling the households up, there was a drop about 370,000 jobs. So there's conflicting data in the labor market, and the household one to me is a little more realistic, that people are losing their main job, good paying job, and looking for two jobs. And that's what the indicators are. So I would think that it's not a strong labor market. I mean, it's hard to get people, but I think a lot of the good paying jobs are going away.
Yeah, you make some very good points. And like some of those headline numbers we see, like I mentioned, the unemployment rate, the number of jobs reported each month, do show a strong labor market. But as you say, there are other factors that show some areas of weakness. The fact that there's more jobs out there than people looking for jobs. One thing that these numbers don't show, what you pointed to, are people working multiple jobs because they're not getting paid enough. And so there certainly are areas of concern in the labor market, despite the headline numbers showing a fairly strong labor market. So that's a very good point, and thank you for your comment. Going back to the Federal Reserve, so the Fed has been very committed to lowering inflation, tightening their monetary policy in order to bring inflation down. As inflation has remained elevated for so long, also probably because they got kind of a late start to trying to bring inflation down, they have been very aggressive in their actions, most specifically raising the Fed funds target rate. When the Fed first started raising their target rate, they talked about a soft landing, and that's where the Fed is able to lower inflation, kind of slow down growth, but without putting the US economy into a recession. There's really no more talk of a soft landing, and instead they're really just focused on lowering inflation despite possibly pushing us into a recession. They lately have said they don't know if their efforts will lead to a recession, but without getting back to price stability, the economy really won't work for anyone. And so the Fed funds target rate, which is currently at 4%, is expected to reach possibly 4.5% by year end. So just over the next month and a half or so. The Fed funds target rate, as I mentioned, they've been very aggressive. So the rate started the year at 0%, ended the quarter at 3.25%, now at 4%. So that means there have been 6 rate hikes this year. During the quarter ended 9/30, there were 2 rate hikes, and both of those were 75 basis point hikes, so 0.75% hikes. So very aggressive rate hikes by the Fed to try to, what has been so far unsuccessful, bring down inflation. With the Fed raising interest rates, we saw interest rates rise in the bond markets quite sharply. They've been moving higher really since the beginning of the year. We've also seen a lot of volatility in both the bond markets and the stock markets. In the bond markets, again, where we invest the district's funds, yields are at their highest levels now at about 15 years. So that's really good for when making new purchases for the portfolio. But we do see right now that the Treasury yield curve is inverted, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a couple pages. Just another page here, kind of looking closer at inflation. This data here is as of August 31st, but it is very similar to what we saw for the September reading, which is the latest CPI reading that we have right now. So what this shows, the table on the right-hand side breaks out the various components of CPI, of Consumer Price Index. It then shows the change in prices over the last 12 months, what each of those components, what their weight is to overall CPI, and then their contribution to CPI, again, for August. So the change in prices from August of 2022 to August of 2021. And then the chart on the left-hand.
We have one more question.
Okay.
Hi, Allison. Hi, Rich again. So the Fed seems to be chasing their own tail and trying to catch up. They were slow to come to these rate increases, the interest rate increases. So now they're trying to hammer this home. A lot of people are scared that, yeah, we're at maybe 4.5 end of the year, but this is only the beginning. What is your expectation of where this interest rate is going to end up at? Because under Volcker, it was up to 18-20%. Are we looking at that much?
Right now, no, nothing quite that high is expected. The Fed had their latest meeting earlier this month in November, where they, again, as I mentioned, they raised the rate again, bringing it to 4%. Market expectations, kind of based on what Chair Powell had to say following that meeting, is that the rate will likely get up to around 5%, maybe 5.5% next year. Again, probably one more rate hike this year, and then several more next year, bringing it up to around 5% before it kind of stays there for a little while and then moves lower. But of course, that expectation is on the thought that inflation will start to move lower. And that hasn't happened yet, despite the Fed being very aggressive since they started raising rates in March, like you said, likely a little bit late. But so far, those rate hikes have not lowered inflation. So if we get up to a 5% rate and still there's no lowering of inflation, again, the rate hikes will probably go higher. But as of right now, most of the market expects the target rate to get up to around 5%, 5.5%, and that it should be sufficient from there. But it's all very data dependent.
Right. So I guess I have two questions. One, a lot of people don't trust the Fed anymore to get the job done. So how do we plan for if they're wrong? And then the second part has to get into your energy thing. Diesel has a 25-day supply. in the United States. It moves everything. It triggers all the inflation indexes. So what if diesel, we get lower and the price of diesel skyrockets overnight, which can happen? Is there any way we can plan for that?
Well, when it comes to the portfolio, as far as, planning for higher interest rates, kind of the plan in the portfolio is to be a bit conservative in managing it in terms of the overall duration or average maturity of the portfolio, to kind of, as you'll see when we talk about the portfolio, currently keeping new purchases in shorter term investments, so that as they mature, you can reinvest into the rising rate environment. So that's how, as far as, the portfolio would address, a continued rise in interest rates.
Go more short term than longer.
Yeah, exactly. And there will be a time, not too far in the future, even as we see interest rates rise, likely, the next 6 months or so, where we may look to add some longer term investments, again, kind of still basing on expectations at this time, which are for rates to kind of peak next year before moving lower. But I mean, I do hear what you're saying about concerns about not necessarily trusting the Fed. And, even if you do, if you will, trust the Fed, I mean, the Fed, every meeting, they're kind of changing their outlook based on new reports of what's happening with inflation. So right now, we can really only base it on the expectation that rates will kind of peak next year. But that said, the strategy can be adjusted if inflation continues to stay high and it's evident that rates will continue to go higher.
Thank you.
So just kind of finishing up this inflation page here. So just looking at the chart on the left-hand side, which shows kind of, it puts December 2019 on the left-hand side of the chart there at 0%, and then shows price changes of these various components since that time. And just a few things I'll point out. If you look at that light blue line, which again is the energy sector, it was one of the first areas where we really saw prices shoot up. Prices started rising back in about April of 2021. That's when we saw inflation start to move above the Fed's 2% target. And energy really led that effort. And even with energy prices coming down recently, prices are still up significantly year over year. For the other sectors, we have seen not such a sharp increase, but we have seen, a slow and steady and not so slow anymore, but a steady rise in prices over the past 18 months, to the point where now inflation has really impacted, every sector, all of our lives. Maybe we don't have to buy a new car, but we do have to buy food. We do have to pay for shelter, and the prices on those components are up, a lot over the past 18 months, and even quite a bit over the past year. So inflation is really broad-based and impacts all consumers. And so you can really see why the Fed is taking such an aggressive stance on it. So just turning to the Fed and looking at some things they have said recently. Here we just pulled some quotes from the Fed's September meeting. As we've talked about, they're very committed to lowering inflation. At their September meeting, Fed Chair Powell noting that right now, the economy is not working for anyone. They're going to be as restrictive as necessary to return inflation to 2%. And then that key point that, no one knows whether this will lead to a recession, or even maybe more importantly, how significant that recession will be. Since the September meeting, again, the Fed met in November, where they raised the rate again. His Fed Chair Powell's comments at that, or following that meeting, indicated that further tightening or more rate hikes will be necessary, but possibly at a slower pace. So maybe not 75 basis point hikes, but 50 or 25. But he did say that there's, a lot of uncertainty and that the Fed still has, some ways to go. So there's also this idea that, well, maybe, since the Fed's been so aggressive, but inflation hasn't come down, but maybe the Fed does need to kind of slow down to give time for these higher prices to start to bring inflation down. And so while the Fed is certainly not going to stop raising interest rates, it sounds like they could begin to slow the extent of the hikes here moving into 2023. This uncertainty, though, as far as what's to expect from the Fed, can be seen when you look at economists' expectations for interest rates, which we show in the 2-year Treasury yield and the 10-year Treasury yield on the bottom. And just looking at the 2-year, while if you look at the dotted line, the median forecast is that we might start to see interest rates fall over the next couple of years. That shaded area shows you the range of forecasts, and so you can see they're really just all over the place. So those individual expectations really vary considerably and just highlight the uncertainty right now. On the next page, we'll look at interest rates, kind of see what happened here over the last quarter. The chart on the right-hand side is the U.S. Treasury yield curve. I'm showing maturities from 3 months out to 30 years. However, the district funds are invested in that 5 years and under area of the curve. And then we show what interest rates were at the start of the year in that dotted blue line, and then the start of the quarter in that solid light blue, and then the end of the quarter in that solid dark blue. So going from the solid light blue to the dark blue, you can see that interest rates moved higher across the yield curve during the quarter. You can also see that the yield curve, or very clearly see that the yield curve was pretty sharply inverted at quarter end, meaning that shorter term interest rates are currently higher than longer term interest rates. An inverted yield curve always brings along with it talks of a recession, because while it's not a traditional economic indicator, it has historically preceded a recession. Those shorter term interest rates are up quite sharply. And if you look at the table on the left-hand side, that last column showing the change over the quarter, you can see how much faster those shorter term interest rates moved up than the longer term rates. Those shorter term interest rates just really impacted by the Fed's activity with raising the rate, but also the Fed's outlook. So again, with the expectation of more rate hikes to come, that shorter end of the yield curve just has continued to move higher. This movement has been great, as I mentioned, for new purchases in the district's portfolio, capturing very high yields to help the interest earnings on the portfolio. But rising interest rates do negatively impact prices on bonds. And so we have seen, bond market total returns be pretty poor these last few quarters. That's the last page I had on the economy and interest rates. So I can move into the portfolio. This first page here is a consolidated summary. Is there a question?
No, I think we're all good.
Okay. The first page here is a consolidated summary, meaning that it includes both the funds that PFM is actively managing, which is around $87 million, so most of the funds. But then there is another about $1 million in certificates of deposit, FDIC insured, which PFM is not managing, but we do provide reporting on it, but we are not billing on it. And as that 1 million, as those CDs mature, they will move over into the main portfolio. So on this page, just so you see, have a look at all of the invested securities, again, around $88.7 million, with most invested in 2 to 4 year maturities. Here you can see the issuers of all of the holdings. including, again, those managed by PFM as well as the CDs. Right, now for the next several pages here, we will get into just focus on the funds that PFM is managing. And so those certificates of deposit have been removed from the following pages. So again, around just a little bit over 87 million invested in the portfolio. The portfolio has an effective duration, a calculation which factors in call dates and things like that of around 1.35 years. But looking at the overall maturity, the average maturity is around 2.8 years. The portfolio's yield at cost, which is essentially its earnings rate, was 1.02% at the end of the quarter. This is up from 0.82% at the end of last quarter. So we have seen the yield of the earnings rate move higher as we were able to add some higher yielding securities to the portfolio. The portfolio is very high credit quality. The average credit quality is AA. And if you look at the sector allocation, you can see the majority of the portfolio is allocated to federal agencies, and those are callable federal agencies with rates which were purchased back, majority were purchased back in 2020 and 2021 when rates were much lower. And so given how high interest rates are now, it is very unlikely that those federal agencies will get called prior to maturity.
Allison, we have a quick question.
Hi, okay. Allison, Rich again. Hey, yeah, on the previous page, one of our investments with the federal farm credit banks. Now, yes. Consider the drought severity. How much farmland do we have a way of knowing how much farmland they have lent to that doesn't have enough water to farm or projected to be defaulted?
I would imagine that information is available, and I can, oops, excuse me, I can ask for it for you.
Yeah, we'll see it in California.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I'll see if I will try to get the information for you, and I will pass it on to Jennifer to get it to you. Yeah, the federal agencies, of course, are very highly rated securities. It's not to say they don't ever run into problems, as we did see some of the federal agencies like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac run into some problems, back in 2008, but they were backed up by the U.S. Treasury at that time. Federal agencies do typically carry the same rating as the U.S. government because, again, while they're not guaranteed by the U.S. government as treasuries are, they do have an implicit backing of the federal government. But again, that's not to say there can't be issues, in the underlying loans. And so I will look for some or get some information and get that over to you.
Appreciate that, Allison, because back in 2008, weren't we within 4 hours of a meltdown of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae?
Yeah, but it was different circumstances. Oh,
sorry. Yeah.
Can we just let the presentation move on?
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out what is our exposure.
But she's going to get that to us,
yeah.
And I think that's a reasonable question that should be pursued, and Allison is going to get that.
Yes, so I'll just move back to a very similar page here. Again, just the issuer diversification again, and I'll just highlight here on this page the allocation to the credit instruments, so the commercial paper, the corporate note. You can see the allocations there are very small, 3%. We do typically, try to keep the allocation to credit instruments to around 3%, always below 5%. So as we go forward, we'll see the allocations to some of these credit sectors grow. You will continue to see very good diversification among the issuers. Here's the portfolio activity for the quarter. We had some maturities in commercial paper. And as I mentioned earlier, we're currently reinvesting maturities into other short-term investments. In this case, it was commercial paper again, 2 to 6 month commercial paper, with yields very close to or above 3%. So that again helped to, pull the overall yield on the portfolio up higher. I think that's the last page on, then your earnings here. I'm just showing you the accrual basis earnings on the portfolio. Again, ticked up slightly over the quarter, as again, adding some higher interest rates. There are then pages for your information. I won't go through on all of the holdings in the portfolio, as well as the transactions in the portfolio. And then just very briefly, here's that other portfolio, the segregated, the certificates of deposit that PFM is not actively managing, the FDIC insured, but we do report on them. And then as they do mature, the funds will move over into the main portfolio. So just
another question.
Okay.
So Allison, back on page 11, it says total net activity minus 115,000. Can you just discuss that?
Yeah, so what this activity is here, it's not about a realized gain or loss. It's just that the amount of securities that matured was about $115,000 less than the purchases that were made. So the total cost of those. And so those excess funds would have stayed in the money market fund associated with the portfolio. So it's not a loss, a realized loss. It's just the change in allocation of commercial paper in the portfolio, if that makes sense. So when it matured, around $10 million matured, but we only reinvested $9,900,000 essentially. And then the remainder of the funds would be in the cash account associated with the portfolio. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just finally, and then I'm happy to take more questions, but looking ahead, as we talked about, the overall economic outlook has deteriorated. Recessionary risks do continue to mount. The housing market has cooled due to higher prices and higher borrowing rates. The jobs report, as we talked about, fairly strong job report, but with underlying weaknesses. But lower gasoline prices have helped consumer confidence. That said, the impact of higher prices on pretty much every good or service is taking a toll on the consumer. So needless to say, while the expectations of an upcoming recession have increased, there really is a lot of uncertainty on if we will go into a recession. And if we do, a bigger uncertainty regarding how severe a recession could be, with most economists currently expecting any downturn to be mild. Again, highlighting the word currently because everything is data dependent. We will get an updated CPI reading tomorrow. So we'll get to see if the Fed rate hikes are finally starting to are finally starting to work to bring down inflation. The Fed, as we talked about, is very committed to lowering inflation. So we expect to see additional rate hikes, another one this year. And then right now, the expectation is for several more next year, with rates kind of then leveling out in 2023. In the district's portfolio over the next, the short term, the next 3 to 6 months, we will continue to reinvest those maturities, which will all be commercial paper maturities, in short-term securities like we did last quarter to capture those very high yields on the short end of the curve. That will also give time for those longer maturity agencies to kind of move closer to their maturity dates. get them in a better position to potentially sell some of those prior to maturity to look to further diversify the portfolio. But of course, safety and risk management will remain the primary objective in all the decisions that we make. So I'll stop there and I can address any other questions.
Director Peters.
Yes, good morning, thank you. I see that the consolidated summary on page 6, I guess. I'm looking to know what was so it says we have, our total account has 88.75 million. What did we have, did I just miss it, but to show what we've had, like first, what was our balance, PFM managed account balance, first quarter, how our account has performed?
Good question. 1.2%.
Oh, well, what's the dollar amount?
Yeah, so the report does not show the change in the balance over the quarter. When we start to move ahead, starting next quarter, we will begin to show performance on a total return basis. And so we will show the change in market value quarter over quarter, so unrealized gains or losses. The other piece that we don't show the total, this piece here, this page can give you what the earnings were on the portfolio on a realized basis. So not taking into account any unrealized market value changes, but just showing the realized earnings on the portfolio.
Gains and losses, nothing. No change.
Yeah, so the realized gains and losses would only happen if we were to sell a security, and no securities were sold this last quarter.
Did I hear Director Johansson, we're down 1.2%?
No, up.
We're up.
Up.
That's what the return was.
That's
Yeah, that 1.2% is the earnings rate on the portfolio, which did increase over the quarter. So it's not necessarily a backward-looking return. It's more of a forward-looking earnings rate. But starting next quarter, we will begin showing a backwards-looking return.
Thank you. On that same page that you're on, it says change in amortized cost. Could you define that?
Yeah, so when securities are purchased, they are commonly purchased at a premium or a discount. So if it's purchased at a premium, that means you pay more for it than the par value. So if you buy a $5 million security, maybe you paid $5.5 million for it. And if you were not to amortize it when that security matured, you would be showing a $500,000 loss, because you would get $5 million back for something you paid $5.5 million for. But the security had a higher cost because it had a higher coupon, so more interest. And so what the change in amortized cost does is it just spreads that $500,000 out over the life of the security in this example. So it's just an accounting method. That's how we're showing the earnings on this amortized cost basis, as opposed to showing it on a cost basis, which wouldn't have that line, but then you would show a loss when the security matured.
Allison, Rich again, I just want to say you guys are doing a really good job.
Yes.
With the conditions and circumstances that you have to deal with. This is not easy. And a lot of these investments were placed long before you came, and we'll write them out. To do so would not be good. And thank you for converting them as fast as you can and into something higher interest.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I did have a very good conversation with the district's portfolio manager. I don't make any of the trades in the portfolio, but I talked to him, about the strategy on a lot of those callable agencies, that were purchased a while ago, and they're not easy to get rid of, given interest rates currently. I mean, it would be wonderful to sell them all and reinvest them, but we realize if we did that, you'd be taking some very large realized losses. And so we are certainly not going to do that. So patience and a good strategy here to kind of get the portfolio to be able to take advantage of these higher interest rates.
Again.
Any further board comments or questions? Any member of the public like to comment or question on portfolio review? Turn on your phone. Seeing none?
Could I say one other
Yes,
thing?
go ahead.
I'm glad to hear that we'll see the kind of your quarter-over-quarter performance. I think that's really important. I think it's also important periodically to understand what the annual fees are that we're paying for your management services, which gives me great comfort to have the professional staff that you represent managing this large portfolio. I think it's just important to also put forth what the fees are that we're paying for that service.
Director Hall, I can provide that. They are a percentage of the overall amount of the portfolio. So we get invoiced the fees on, I believe it's monthly, isn't it, Debbie? Yeah. So it's about between, depending on how much money we have in our portfolio, between $60,000 and $75,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's based on the amount of investment or on the earnings?
On the amount of the value of the portfolio at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reporting will show the fees.
It goes to Laura's question, how much did we earn this year versus?
Yes.
Yeah,
How
we're
much?
earning more than we're coming.
Yeah, so before you were still paying fees, you were just paying as basis points from the back end. So
Right.
the district wasn't able to actually see what your fees were.
Right.
My experience, when you pay fees in that manner, they're typically about 3 times as much as under this more of a standardized fee structure. We can provide that information.
Yeah.
I think that's been one of the questions the public has had historically.
Yeah.
Is, geez, I mean, we had, within the last couple of months, a member of the public going, you only earned penny for your
Right.
$90 million portfolio. So I just think it's part of the transparency.
Yeah, we can certainly provide that information with the quarterly report.
This is why changes were made.
This is, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Very exciting to see
It's
that.
really difficult to unwind actual the cost of managing your investments under the other type of investment structure. It's management structure, and that's typically more of a structure that a private entity would use, not a public agency. And so when we made this change, that was one of the purposes. Was to also have greater transparency just on how our portfolio is managed, and to have it managed by very capable professionals. So thank you, Allison.
Yep.
And Monique, who's not here.
Mhm.
Allison, anybody else like to make a comment? Anybody, member of the public at this time? Start on your phone. All right, thank you so much, Allison.
Yep, thank
Great
you.
report.
Thank you.
Have a good day. All right. Next item is the consent agenda.
I would like to, first time I think, I'd like to pull 4D,
For E?
D, as in dog.
And I'd like to pull 4E. 4D. Anybody else? All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 4A, 4B, 4C, 4F, 4G.
All right.
I'll second. Second, Peck.
Laura got the second.
Oh, she did. Okay. Quick. Good job, Laura.
Member of the public like to comment on the consent agenda as proposed? Start on your phone or come to the podium. All right, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3, aye. Division 2.
Aye. All right, thank you. So item 4D, Rich,
Hi, Monica.
she's coming up. Morning, Monica.
Good morning.
So, my main question is that, I'm not against the 5%, except that, does it cover your costs? And if it does not, what percentage will cover your costs?
Yeah, it doesn't currently cover, so the fees are not set at a rate that's required to cover the cost. The board had previously directed staff to establish the fees in comparison with other like facilities. I do think that the fees should be established to have full cost recovery. Currently, there is about, what was it, $350,000 deficit. Recreation is running that's subsidized directly by hydropower, and then hydropower also then contributes about another $150 a year for some capital type improvements. So it definitely isn't set high enough. If the board would so like, staff can begin working for next year to develop a full cost recovery fee schedule, which I think it would be a great idea.
I would too.
I would too, and I was prepared to pull this item also, based on the fact that we've had increased or a lot of demand for our product or service.
Yeah.
And, along with the dispersed camping, I think it'd be appropriate to have a workshop or pursue this item in a bigger way than just raising it. I'm in favor of raising it even more than that, but.
Why don't we?
We're not limited on this one. We can, this is.
No, you can. I would not recommend just arbitrarily setting rates at this point.
Okay.
I think my recommendation would be for the board to take consideration of the rates as proposed to you today, and then to direct staff to develop a full cost recovery survey so that we can figure out what that level would be for rate establishment, so we have full cost recovery for our revenue.
Why would we not, raise them 8 or 10%
Yeah,
this time
my question.
instead of, I mean, if, we know we're way behind in having full cost recovery, and I personally am not, I think we should have more discussion on whether we can be a self-supporting operation in recreation. Monica, I would just say, you have the most beautiful campsites on the planet.
Yes.
And that,
We try.
and that the quality that we have deserves a premium.
Amen.
And so I think right now we're kind of somewhere at market.
Right.
And I think people are willing to pay more for what you manage and what you've been able to create. And so therefore, I would say, why wait to raise based on, the full cost recovery, knowing we have to get up some additional amount?
Well said.
Director Heck has a question or a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Director Heck.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling the item, Rich, because I was going to pull this too. And, Monica, my question is, what is our, I think, a vacancy rate? Or are we full at every campground every weekend, all week long through the summer? Or do we have days in which we have open spaces? Can you comment a little bit about the demand and how full we are?
The upper division campgrounds that we have, we still have some upper division campgrounds, which is Fossery, which is a group campsite, Aspen Group, also group, and Silvertip. Basically, those campgrounds are booked through the season. Where we have issues on those campgrounds is when we get to open them because of snow, and then when we close because of snow too. So that up there, and those prices, I've really been aggressive in increasing those, because when I first came on, they were extremely low. I think Fossery was like $77 a night. Right now, it's $154. So we have really kind of pushed those to where a group site should be.
Good.
Scotch Flat, throughout the season, I mean, we are booked every weekend. Towards the end of the season, once school starts, then during the week is when we're starting to slow up a little bit, but our weekends are still full. a lot of times, like through October, we were full the whole month of October just because we had decent weather. Long Ravine, well, Peninsula closes September 15th just because it's our furthest one out in our local area, and we don't get, if you want to camp, you can go to Orchard or Long Ravine. Why would you go all the way up there? It's kind of a slower campground. That campground is more of the families that have been going there for years. Long Ravine and Orchard are more of, they are booked fully during the weekends. Throughout the season, we do have vacancies. But Orchard is very good. We have a lot of church groups that go there. We have a lot of school groups that go there, because it's more of a tent site campground for a lot of the RVs. I mean, and we also need to keep in mind is that, you know, myself coming on 5 years ago, the campgrounds were extremely run down.
Right.
So
I remember.
We have really tried to get us to a level of where, you know, we're not always being reactive. During the season, we're reactive because the public, and you don't know what the public's going to be doing. But we are getting to a point like our sewer systems, our water systems, the power, internet, those kind of things we're not having to deal with during the season because we've gotten to a point where we've fixed them. And so now we're doing, like right now, starting next week, I've got a company coming in and doing some site restoration. So we're getting new pads. So some of those are the things that are still run down, where you go to a campsite and it's a beautiful area, but your pad's all crushed up and ugly. And working on those kind of things right now to start to have more of a aesthetic look, I guess, you know, when you drive in. Oh, this is my site.
Well, you know, I want to join in with what Director Hull says. I mean, I think our campgrounds are among the finest anywhere in the Sierras, and we should be getting, you know, what it costs to run them. That said, that may be push us out of market. So I would not be prepared today to raise anything above 5%, but I would like to see staff do some looking about the market and make some, you know, educated guesses about what our vacancy, I think a vacancy factor, but, you know, what our demand would be if the price were up to, you know, 8% or 10%. I mean, we do have to keep up with inflation, and I think people understand that. So I'm in favor of doing the 5% with the caveat that we look at a further raise down the road to keep up with the cost.
Additionally, as Jennifer said, we typically, in the past, we've always done our rate comparison to other agencies that are, or other campgrounds that are similar to us.
Right.
Unfortunately, in our area, we don't really have a lot. Most of our campgrounds that are near us are Forest Service campgrounds, or state, or, you know, and
that are subsidized, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
we, you know, just to throw this out there, every year we do have a 5% rate increase. And I mean, I'm not the one answering the phones all the time, but I do get feedback from my staff. And we're not having people, every once in a while you get that person that says, oh, kind of pricey. But I mean, that's not every customer. That's not, you know, one in 20. That's in every once in a while. Because I think they know what they're getting in our area, and also our, you know, our upper division campgrounds, our group sites. Even with the hikes we've had, we haven't. I mean, we're still able to get fully booked season long. So that's, you know, that's great.
Well, I'm also really interested in looking at them differently. In looking at them differently, because I'm intrigued by the group sites that are up higher, and my guess is those take a little more staff time, they're harder to get to, so on and so on. So the costs for administering those, I would think, is a little greater. And so I'm interested in perhaps a bigger increase at the upper division camps, and then, you know, a different increase for the lower division camps, and play with that a little bit as well.
Yeah, to be just honest, it's actually, we've got it down to a science up there. It's actually probably cheaper for us to manage those campgrounds and to maintain and operate those campgrounds than it is down here. A group campsite, they don't want you in their business. We go up
Mhm.
twice a week, up on Mondays and Thursdays. And, we've got it down to a science. It's great. Now, down here, you've got a campground that you're gonna have 4,000 people there, you know, on a Saturday.
Right.
We need to have staff, we need to be in people's business, making sure people are following the rules, and and being reactive to those things that get broken.
Mhm. Well, thank you. Yeah, let me just, I'll just end by really thanking you, Monica. I know you and your team do a stellar job, and I appreciate it. And I know our customers appreciate it. So thank you.
We open up the first business day of January for
We have
reservations.
that much time.
We do. I would recommend sticking with what we're proposing and directing staff to do a better analysis. I don't wanna, I'm a little bit concerned about not making a fact-based decision off of real numbers, because I don't wanna come back twice.
Right.
You know, the recommendation, if we do an arbitrary 10% today, maybe that's the wrong or right number, and I don't want it to come back again in 2 months and unwind that. I think we have a little bit of time to try to make an adjustment.
So my point, I guess my point in, as one who went to Fauchery in the 80s and 90s with 40 or 50 other certified organic farmers organized by Amigo, I think we're paying $1 a night per person. I mean, that is a bargain.
Yeah.
Even at $3 a night
But
as a group, but I get my point. At 5%, we're not keeping up with inflation. Operations and maintenance has seen a 40% increase over the 2 years. I'm not comfortable not keeping up with inflation. Because that money then has to be subsidized by hydro, which means they can't do a certain project or they can't subsidize water rates. And that goes on to the water rate guys who's maybe not even using the facility. So I'm looking for more than 5%.
I support that. I think we've had wage increases, we've had the material cost increases. We are, I think, a premier, we're at the top level of recreation services there at our campground. And we know that hydro is underwriting at a significant level. And I don't think an increase from 5 to 10% or 5 to 8% is going to create a profit for Greg. Yeah. It's just gonna close the gaps ever so slightly. So I don't feel comfortable approving a 5% rate increase, knowing that we have to make more substantial increases if we're gonna go towards self-supporting, and knowing that, and the piper comes to call. I mean, it's just a matter of time. So I would support a higher rate increase.
Any further brief discussion at this time?
I just have one thing to add. I just want to put it in perspective. Fauchery is 2 campsites. It is not what is causing any financial issues in recreation. I do think there are some other modifications that need to be made to the business model in general, as far as what campsites have year-round camp hosts, what campgrounds are open, how, if they're closed down and when they're closed down. I am just more of from a business perspective, we need to look at recreation as a whole. If you want to make an arbitrary rate increase, we can do that, but I have nothing to substantiate it for you for right now. I suggest we actually take a real look at the business.
Well, I don't disagree with that, Jennifer. However, what's 5% based on? I mean, we don't have anything that documents that 5% is based on anything. So, I mean, if we're going to talk about rational decision-making, then did you look at 8%? Did you look at 10%? I don't see an analysis of that. And so to say we're going to do it in the future, I fully support that. But, I mean, we're also saying that hydro is underwriting the cost of recreation to the tune of $500,000 a year, and that needs to change. And so why would we not make an incremental step toward that now at a little more aggressive level than 5%?
That's
I
a
don't
good
get it.
question. How did we get to 5%?
Well, because I think in the past, it's always been, we need to keep in line with other campgrounds. I mean, it's been my perspective, board is wanting me to run this analysis, to go to other campgrounds, to see what they offer, to see what we have, make comparisons, and make sure that our rate is within their rate. And that's what I've been doing, okay? So that's where the 5% comes from, is that I've just been going off of board direction. And
They've been probably
the first
going off
one
us.
there's been, you know, an ask to change. There hasn't been an ask in the past. Which we
is
can
fine,
certainly, yeah.
and certainly, none of this is a criticism
Oh,
of
yeah.
you,
No,
Monica.
it's not a criticism, it's
it's just
recognition
that-
that it's a more valuable asset.
Yeah. And you've done a great job, and it's superior to other campgrounds that I've ever been to. So,
Amen.
I just don't understand, why would we delay something that we know is inevitable? We've got a time crunch that you need to have this all wrapped up by January 1st. It doesn't appear that we would be able to do this kind of analysis within the next, I mean, it's not reasonable to think we could do it by the next board meeting in December, so.
So,
We can get pretty close, actually.
hmm?
But this is not that hard of a fee schedule to put together. If the board wants to go with the 10%, I'd also recommend that you consider getting rid of the senior discount.
I'm proposing we do 8% based on the fact
And
that
get
costs
rid of the senior.
going up 6 and inflation is added even more to that.
So,
For an interim.
Didn't we just hear inflation is at 8%?
Yeah,
Right, year over year?
Yes,
in my transportation, when I have to ship something, I get charged the basic rate plus a surcharge, due to increased energy costs, due to increased whatever costs. And you never know what that is. Just have to pay it. I 8 or 10, I kind of prefer 10. But if it's 8, it's still not quite keeping up with inflation that I know of. But
Can I ask a question of Jennifer? So are you saying that you would have an analysis completed by our December board meeting that would tell us, kind of be able to support a model in which over time, the rec area may become self-supported, and that we could then adjust rates with that information for January 1st?
No, you know what, I think we just go with the 10%. It's easier. I'm not overly comfortable with it, but it's up to the board's discretion. I don't care to, I don't typically set rates that arbitrarily, but I think it's fine. I would also get rid of the, senior discount. Yeah.
Why would you get rid of the senior discount?
Just from the standpoint that anytime there's a discount afforded to anybody, that means somebody else is paying for part of that person's fair share.
it's.
They're being subsidized by
it's just
somebody.
We're picking a winner, district money, and
Yeah.
taking it away from water rates.
Well, and the, just going over, I think this last year, I think I told you we had like 180 people that ended up using the discount, but those were people that would have really used the discount whether we had it or not. And we have no way to verify that they're really of age, because a lot of the applications, and most of the people use it for the season passes, and a lot of the applications are sent via mail, and nobody wants to send a copy of
okay.
their driver's license, like that. So it's not like we brought in more seniors because we offered a senior discount. Those
No.
people that normally got a pass and got their discount.
I see. Okay, well, that's
You're
helpful.
dropping
Thank you.
camping. Yeah, and then you're dropping camping that was $5 off. Again, I don't think you're gonna have a senior coming to the campground because they know they're gonna get $5 off. And on a drop-in camping, they're just gonna come drop in camp.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
We wanna.
I was gonna ask for public comment first. Yes. Any member of the public like to comment on this item, increasing the recreational fee? Start on your phone or come to the podium. Okay,
I'd like to make a motion.
all right.
So I move to approve a 10% increase in recreational rates, also to make all rates equal, and make it effective January 1st, 2022, 3.
And that's also removing the senior discount as
Make
well.
all rates
Okay,
equal.
super, okay.
All right.
Just wanna make sure.
All right.
Confirm who my second is?
Director Hall. All right, any further discussion by the board? Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please? I did already.
You did, I missed it. I didn't hear it. All right, Division 4?
Seems all pretty arbitrary. I agree with the general manager on it.
I hate to throw a wrench in, Leslie. I'm really uncomfortable with some of how the agenda was posted with the 5%. I would prefer, with the arbitrary 10%, we bring it back to the December board meeting, so it's actually put on the agenda.
Okay, that's a good point.
Okay.
So we move to table this?
Okay, so can we table this?
Yeah.
And we will agendize it as, let's talk about how you want it agendized.
Yeah.
As a 5 to 10% increase?
10% plus all rates equal, which
Right.
eliminates senior discount.
No discount.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll table it today, if that's okay with the motion maker in the
Yep.
second, and we'll bring it back agendized with that language.
I'm much more comfortable with that. Thank you. That was a good solution.
So, original motion maker also makes a motion to table, and assume second.
I move to table.
Okay.
Second.
Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 4?
Aye.
Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3? Division 2?
Aye. Okay, thank you all. Moving on to general orders.
Yep, 4E.
Item 4E.
Yeah.
4E, right?
4E on the Harris
Correct.
Road District.
Did we pull that one?
Water line.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
Is that my left ear? Didn't hear that.
That's right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I just have a general question about this. I know that last time we spoke about this and we said, well, you know, we've gotten 50 plus 1% that have paid their good faith deposit. But what if when the construction costs come in, bid for the construction costs come in, if we don't have 50 plus 1 people that pay for real instead of just good faith, what are we gonna do?
I believe our recommendation would be it does not meet the 50% threshold at that point,
We wouldn't go forward.
and we would return everybody else's deposit.
So that's, because I know that last time we spoke about it, it wasn't clear in the regulations, and we haven't updated them, this train keeps moving forward, and so I just wanted to make sure that we know what our direction is, should that happen, because as we know, construction costs, everything's really high right now, and the term is shorter, and the, obligation is higher. So we should have something documented that we could tell these people per board direction, if once the costs come in, actually memorialize that.
Well, we have it in the, and Shannon can, we have it in there that if it's 10%, if it's greater than 10%, then that we have to reach out to them and have them have the opportunity to back out. So it's in the agreement.
Greater than 10% of the overall
Of
cost.
what was the estimated cost. Construction.
That's their agreement.
It's in their agreement that they signed, so if it's only 5% more, then they don't have the opportunity to back out. But if it's 11% more, then we let them know that the cost is 11% more, and at that point, they have an opportunity to back out. That's in the agreement that they signed.
But it's not in any of our regulations.
No, not specifically. Agreement.
I think you made good changes on this, and I think that's really important, and we'll see how it goes with all of the.
Yeah,
well,
okay. So it's in all of the agreements that.
Correct. That's the,
Thank you.
yeah, yep. But, one question.
No, that was it, yeah, so I move that we approve on the Harris Road District Finance Water Line Extension project.
I'll second. Ricky seconds.
Ricky, yes, second. All right, is there any public comment on item 4E, the Harris Road District Finance Water Line Extension Funding Agreement? Turn on your phone. All right, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, and just to clarify,
Yeah.
Director Hall did beat out that
She
second.
beat out.
Okay.
There's
It's
a
that Zoom-
I'll just stay
that Zoom-
quiet the rest of the meeting.
All right, Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes,
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 2.
All right, thank you. Okay, now to,
I got one quick one. So before Shannon, Doug left, talking to someone from the public last night that they just had nothing but praise for Shannon and you for working on a project. I mean, they just go, you guys bent over. You just made things easy, you did everything right, and it was great.
Shannon. Okay. Thank you, Shannon. All right. Okay, general orders, item 5A, annual comprehensive financial report. Going to jump off of that.
I'm gonna kick it off, and then I'm going to turn it over to Justin Williams, who is our auditor on there. I see Justin. It sounds like we might need to take a quick break.
Yes, okay, we will take a quick break.
Justin, is that all right? We're gonna take a quick
You take a
5-minute
break,
break.
Justin?
Sounds good.
live.
We're live. Did anybody see Ricky? Ricky here?
Not yet.
There she is, okay. All right, we're back in session. We're gonna have a presentation on the CAFR from Justin Williams.
President Beerwine, would you mind if I said a couple of things
Please
first?
do.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to start this out by acknowledging staff in the accounting division, starting with Debbie. So we have Debbie, maybe you stand up so the board, we have a couple of new faces in accounting that I think everybody would like to meet. So Debbie is our controller, it's Desiree. Desiree just recently was promoted to the accountant position. So she has really stepped up into that position. She is very capable. Desiree has been with the district for what? 7 years, that's what I was gonna say. 7 years now. She started out as a finance assistant, and now she has been promoted to the position of accountant, and she's doing just a wonderful job. She has been very able to tackle some of the more difficult auditing tasks as well as reconciliations, so we greatly appreciate Desiree. Elizabeth is new for us. She came to us from the city of Grass Valley, so we stole a good one. She's our new, we stole a new payroll. She is our new payroll technician, so she is filling that new classification that the board just recently approved, and she's doing just a wonderful job, especially given the amount of staff we have and the complexities associated with our current finance software. Jennifer Mirza, she just transferred down from maintenance. So our accounts payable individual, she left on a new life adventure, so she resigned about a month ago, and Jennifer has stepped in and taken over. She's doing just a wonderful job. So she's responsible for doing all the invoice paying and inputting all the checks and making sure those are processed properly. And then we have Val. Val is also an accountant, and she is just wonderful. She takes task on a lot of the more challenging accounting aspects. But this is all under the leadership of Debbie. So Debbie should really be commended this year. Yeah. One of the best things about this particular audit is that a finding that had been on the books since, I believe, 2014, related to closing and basically accounting procedures and reconciliations, which was creating a large number of journal entries and adjustments after the end of fiscal year end, was able to be removed, and this is a testament to Debbie's hard work and her diligence, and Debbie has some just amazing technical accounting skills, so I just wanted to really recognize Debbie for that and say thank you, because she does put in a lot of hard work and effort to get the audit done in time. So we know that it took a little bit longer this year to get it out, but it was simply because we were in the midst of doing all of the ongoing cleanup. So I greatly appreciate Debbie's leadership throughout this. And then we have Justin. Justin comes from Munt. He is, yes, ma'am.
I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the board when I say thank you so much. This past year and a half, you have all done a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in the accounting team, and I don't believe the entire accounting team is here present, but I just want to acknowledge you and your colleagues. These kinds of changes are really challenging for a team, and we on the board really understand that what you've been through. We're grateful for what you've done. These are important changes that we've been looking to see at the board level, but it took you as the staff to make it happen, and I am really grateful for all of the hard work and stress that you've dealt with in order to make that happen, so thank you.
Okay. She does speak for the board.
Yeah. And we are missing two individuals. Nancy, she is also a senior finance analyst. She is in charge of our budget and all of our capital assets. She doesn't appear to be in here, but she is greatly appreciated as well as Diana, who actually works for a temp agency, but she's been working with us for a long time, and she is also a great asset to our team. So because I did want to thank all of you. Thank you for all your hard work, and I know there's been many times when you wanted to pull your hair out with all of the phantomation issues, and our financial software seems to want to die on us every time we're trying to do payroll. But these ladies, they ensure that people get paid on time. They do just a diligent job with all of their accounting work. And I also wanted to thank you for putting up with all the constant changes and working on improvement, and for participating and recommending your own improvements. So keep up the good work, and we all greatly appreciate you.
Jennifer?
So,
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I want to add my my voice to the choir here that Karen started, because when I first came on this board, I've been through 4 CAFRs, and this is outstanding. So Debbie and your team, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I think the first CAFR I went through I think I had 50 little sticky notes on it, and it was just horrible. And Debbie, you know, because you were here previously, and I had a lot of hard questions. And you guys have made extraordinary changes, and I just want to honor you all as a team and what great work you've done, and thank you so much. And I didn't have to put any sticky notes in this, so thank you.
I also want to take a moment to thank Stephanie Bouchain. She's the consultant that's been working with us. She constantly pushes us to improve in all areas. And then to Justin and his team, it's really difficult for auditors to come into a new agency and do a brand new audit for the first time, because there's a lot of rules and procedures and policies that the audit team has to learn. So they were very patient with us. Even when we started pushing on the end, which Justin knows I can get a little bit impatient towards the end, I start getting nervous. But he put up with me as always, so big thank you to Justin and his team. So with that, we'll turn it over to Justin to present the 2021 audit to the board. And just as a reminder, this is a receive and file, and then we will be publishing the report.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Presentation. Second. Okay. Everybody see that? Summary audit results. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Justin Williams, audit partner at MUN CPAs. This was obviously our first year as a firm doing your district's audit. And so I'm here to present the audit results for December 31st, 2021. One thing I'd like to remind management as well as boards, the financial statements themselves, this big AFR or ACFR document, that's the responsibility of management. All the numbers, all the footnotes and information in there is a responsibility of management. Our job as the auditors to come in and form an independent opinion on those financials to let the reader of the financials know whether or not the information is fairly stated. So a little bit about our audit process and how we ultimately got here to be able to report these results. We started our audit field work in July, toward the end of July. Even though we were out there in the field in July, we request a whole lot of information, as Jennifer, Debbie, and the rest of the finance team know. We request a lot of information up front prior to being out there on site. We do a lot of planning work up front. We get all the information in our system so we can start to do different analysis. We pull samples ahead of time and provide them to district staff so they can pull all the support and have things ready for us by the time we're out there doing the work. So just an example of some of the types of procedures that we do. I mentioned during the planning process, we'll do analytical review where we're looking at balances and accounts comparing them to prior years and current years and make sure that they're meeting our expectations. We modify our audit procedures according to risk-based approach. And so certain areas, obviously, that we consider to be higher risk, we'll focus our attention a little bit more on those. So a lot of that's done up front prior to us even coming out into the field. We look at board minutes throughout the year to make sure we have a good idea what's going on at the district as well. Once we get out there, a big part, even though this is a financial statement audit and our ultimate goal is to form an opinion on your financials, an important part of that is looking at the internal controls that you have in place. And so if we're going to have recommendations, I mean, I know obviously the prior auditors have had some as well. It's usually as the result of this part where we're looking at your controls, noting any weaknesses that we noted, and then make recommendations on those. So we'll look at really 4 different main areas on the processes and controls. We look at the cash receipts or revenue coming into the district. We'll look at the disbursements, expenses. What are the controls over there? We're looking for approvals. We're looking for proper segregation of duties amongst the different people involved in these processes. HR and payroll. We look at hiring processes, termination processes, as well as the payroll function, making sure people are getting paid the proper amounts, obviously, and then making sure that payroll is getting done timely as well. Also look at the financial reporting side, and really that's how just the different day-to-day transactions are accounted for in your accounting system, and then ultimately roll up into the financial statements that we form our opinion on. We look at any prior year findings that the previous auditors had, and as we're going through these different areas, we determine whether or not the recommendations have been implemented or not. Next part of the audit, and again, this was all done during that fieldwork phase and before, and some follow-up after, but it's a testing of the actual numbers. And so I think this is what most people think of when you think of an audit. It's a testing of the year-end balances at 12/31, as well as activity throughout the year. I put an example of some different types of tests that we do as auditors. Cutoff testing is a big one. I mentioned earlier that we take a risk-based approach. That's a requirement now for audits to document risk assessment and adjust your audit procedures accordingly. But cutoff testing is generally a higher risk area, so we focus a lot of our procedures on that. And what that means is throughout the year, agencies usually are really good at doing day-to-day transactions, and it's part of the regular operations. But when you come to a year end where you have a cutoff, there's different types of entries that have to be done. Accrual entries, a lot of reconciliations and true up entries to make sure things are recorded properly. And so there's just a little bit higher risk for error there. So we look at transactions prior to December 31st and after December 31st into the new year, looking at different samples to make sure things are recorded in the proper periods. Confirmation of balances is a really strong test that we do, where we send third-party confirmations directly to financial institutions who respond directly back to us to confirm bank balances, investment balances directly to us. Analytical review procedures. In addition to the preliminary analytics, where we're during the planning process, we also use analytics as another type of test where we're looking at different ratios or different variance analysis from year over year to make sure that they meet our expectations. And if there's anything unusual, then we would drill down a little bit further and find out what's going on there. Then the financial statements, putting together the financial statements and making sure that they're in accordance with all of the different requirements that are out there. So as a result of those audit procedures, there's 4 different reports or letters that we issue. First one's an audit opinion. That's our main one. That's our independent auditor's report on your financials. That goes at the front of the annual comprehensive financial report. We issue a separate government audit standards report, separate from the ACFR or CAFR. And then we issue 2 separate letters, communication with governance, and then a management letter as well. So I will quickly go over the results of each of those. First one, independent auditor's report. There's 4 different types of opinions that an auditor can give: unmodified, qualified, adverse, or disclaimer. And unmodified is what you want, and that's what we have here. It's a clean audit opinion. The audit opinion actually does look a little different this year. It's expanded. The auditing standards changed the format of that. One thing I do like about it is now the opinion is in the very first paragraph on the audit report. And now a few years ago, the format changed where there were headings as well. And so now it says opinion or opinions in this case. Now, very first paragraph, that's what people look to anyway. So I like it that it's up there right up front that it says the financial statements as presented are materially correct. It's definitely good news there. The next report we issue is the government audit standards report. The main thing to know about this is for governmental agencies, the majority of the government audit standards apply to us as the auditors. We have to obtain additional training to be able to do government audits. There's different procedures that we have to follow as part of our own quality control procedures. The way that it affects our clients or you as the auditee is if we identify any issues with your internal controls that rise to the level of a material weakness or significant deficiency, they get reported in a specified format in this report. As you can see this year, there were none. So that's good news there. In the past, Jennifer alluded to this, there were some material weaknesses that had been reported and they've been either implemented to the extent that we no longer consider them to be a material weakness or significant deficiency. So they're reported, I'll get to that in a second, separately on a management letter. So very good news there. One of the reasons I like to point this one out too is you had mentioned the fact that the district had some findings in the past. If you have findings or comments that are on a management letter, important but not as big a deal as if you have material weaknesses, particularly over financial reporting. And the district has had some of those. And the good news is that those are getting cleared up over time. It's very good news there. Oh, shoot, why did I do that? Okay. The next letter we issue is the communication with the board or those charged with governance. So audit standards require us, in addition to our audit opinion, there's other things that we're required to report directly to you, and this letter accomplishes that. If there are any new accounting policies implemented in the current year, we would let you know that, and there were none. Next year, you're going to have GASB 87, which is a pretty big new pronouncement, and that has to do with leases. And that's a different reporting for leases that'll be in effect next year, but not the year under audit. We're also required to let you know if there are any estimates in your financials. All financials are going to have some sort of estimate. In this case, depreciation, and then the net pension liability and net OPEB liability, just by the nature of those accounts, because they're based on the net pension liability and net OPEB liability are based on actuarial studies. So those are considered to be estimates. Same thing as depreciation, just the nature of how depreciation is recorded.
We have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, hi, Justin. Rich Johansson. On the net pension liability, 2021 was a good year.
Mm-hmm.
So I see we have a significant decrease of what, 14.1 million? And then other post-employment benefits went down also. 2022, how does that look? Are we still getting some good investment performances, or are we? I know it's not part of this audit, but can you give us a heads up?
Well, I mean, 2022, it wasn't as good as we know from an investment standpoint. One of the things about these actuarial studies, though, when it comes to the net pension liability, net OPEB liability, is the way that those actuarial studies are done and the way these amounts are calculated is those investment gains and losses are smoothed out over time. So if you have a great year, you're not going to get a major decrease in a liability and then flip that the next year. It's huge ups and downs. And then so yes, it's probably going to go up a little bit, but not to the full extent of major fluctuations in the market, because those things are smoothed out over time to avoid those large increases and decreases in that liability. Good question. Next part there, we didn't have any difficulties or disagreements with management, no difficulties in performing the audit. Things that we can put on there as an example would be if we had major delays in doing the audit. And we didn't start this audit until toward the end of July. So the fact that we're presenting at the beginning of November is pretty normal. But let's say we started in July and we had a really hard time getting information. There were major delays and I wasn't doing this presentation until February. That may not ultimately change the audit results, but this would be my opportunity to put that on that letter that there were delays for various reasons. That's what typically would be included in this letter. But as you can see, we didn't have any issues like that. And then the audit adjustments, we just had 2 audit adjustments. One of them looks large, but it's just a reclass related to the net pension liability. So there's no net effect. It was just a reclass between the deferred inflows and deferred outflows, essentially liabilities and assets at $2 million. Again, no, that's really just an accounting thing for financial presentation and no net effect. And then the other one was a minor $30,000 reclass as well. So no effect on net assets. Jennifer alluded to this a second ago about that, where one of the reasons that the audit adjustments are important, that when we report these to you, is if you're part of an organization that has a lot of audit adjustments at the end of the year, you may want to question the financial information that you're looking at throughout the course of the year. So it's important to pay attention to that. And as you can see, that neither of these adjustments affected net assets, which is honestly very impressive, especially in the first year of our audit. We almost always have a lot of different adjustments, but things were really good. Laura, I see you have your hand raised.
Oh, sorry, no. Sorry about that, thank you.
Inadvertent hand raised, okay. Okay, so the next letter, I mentioned the management letter earlier. So I said with the government audit standards report, if we had any issues that rose to the level of a material weakness or significant deficiency, we would put it on the in that government audit standards report. If they don't rise to that level, they're called control deficiencies and they're reported on a management letter. Although still important, not as major of a deal as a material weakness or significant deficiency. And the different items that we had on here, several of these had carried over from prior years, tightening up the cash receipts controls and processes. We made a recommendation that there be multiple check signers on certain thresholds of checks, whatever you would like to establish. The financial reporting, making sure that financial reports are getting presented to the board, more comprehensive financial reports, which have been occurring all through 2022. And then also updating the policies and procedures. A big part of what we do, especially in a first year audit, is we obtain all of your policies and procedures and for our perm files, for our permanent files that we roll forward year to year. Several of those were a little outdated, so we're just recommended that those be updated. The good news is in all 4 of these areas, they are either have been implemented or already in the process of being implemented by management. So definitely good news. Since our audit covers the 2021 year, even if they had been corrected in 2022, we still are required to report them because it was the 2021 year under audit. Okay, now you have your hand raised. Yes.
Would you consider the quarterly budget to actual reports, financial reporting?
Yes, I mean, that is part of a financial report. Our recommendation for that was, in addition to those, more of a complete financial statement to include a balance sheet as well, or statement of net assets, and an entire financial on at least a quarterly basis as well. So in conclusion, really good news here, especially for a first year audit. Unmodified opinion, so a clean opinion on the financials themselves. That's great. Other very important part, there were no material weaknesses, compliance issues, or significant deficiencies. We had the 4 management letter comments that I mentioned are in the process of being resolved, and then just the 2 audit adjustments, which is very impressive. The amount of information that we look at is quite a bit, and to ultimately end up with just 2 minor reclasses like this it says a lot about the quality of work that the finance group does. So I will stop this And I would like to say before, if anybody has any questions, that I would like to thank Debbie, the rest of the finance team, Jennifer, Stephanie, Bushine as well. They did a great job in getting us the information, and they can, I'm sure Debbie's probably a little worn out by the amount of requests that we have given to her and her team over the last several months, but a lot goes into providing us with all that information in the first year, and to ultimately end up with really good audit results like this says a lot about the quality of the staff that you have there. So I'd like to thank them for their hard work and helping us out with this audit.
I agree that they've done an excellent job, and from a transparency standpoint, it doesn't get much better than this.
No, it's really good. I mean, these are very good results, and trust me, not all of my presentations are like this. So this is it's great results. And I did mention that a couple of times, especially for our first year. We almost always can come in there and find a lot in a first year, but you do have a lot of good controls and processes in place. And Jennifer had mentioned that financial close, which is a very common one that we see that districts have difficulty in delays in closing and reconciling items, and those contribute then to audit findings and audit adjustments. But when you having that those controls in place really will help a lot and contribute to good audit results like this.
This is Ricky. May I make a comment?
Yes,
Hello?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The other person I want to recognize, in addition to Debbie and her team, is Jennifer, because Jennifer came in and saw what we had and immediately rolled up her sleeves and went to work and saw this needed to happen. And I am so pleased, Jennifer, that you provided the leadership to get this done. Good job, and thank you.
He always says what I'm going to say first, so. I concur 100% that the jumping right in there and accomplishing this a big task. We're very grateful for that.
Staff really deserves the credit.
So you all do well. Director Hall.
On page 87, it's page 65 of the audit itself. It has a table on the ratio of annual debt service expenses to all debt. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that. You know, the numbers here vary quite widely between 2012 and then today. And so I wanted to just get a little perspective on the debt coverage ratio and these numbers presented in the table.
Sure, I can provide a few comments on that. I really don't know much about 2012, but I can provide some comments just in general about this table and what we're looking at here. Essentially, just so everybody has an understanding of what this is, right? I mean, it's a 10-year schedule. So all the schedules that go in the back of the CAFR, or now called ACFR, are over a 10-year period. These are all optional schedules that go in, not part of the required financial statements, but this does provide additional transparency and information to members of the public, which I feel can be very useful here. Going back, so this particular table shows the amount of, obviously, the debt service that you have to pay each year. So total principal amount, total interest amount, and it compares that with the total operating expenses of the district. The idea being that you don't want a majority of your expenditures for the district being taken up with debt, right? And that this is on just the expense side, but then that you can look at the debt coverage ratio, as well as total debt to equity, things like that. But the important thing here is you want a lower number here, because you don't really want a higher number would indicate that you could potentially be higher leveraged and have more debt than maybe necessary. So it's hard to say what's a good number or what's a bad number, but you can look at a trend here and seeing that the fact that it is lower now is a good thing, that you're not, out of your total expenditures, the total amount that you're expending is going toward the operation of the district versus debt. And that's really what this is telling you. And I don't know about going way back then, but clearly there was a lot more debt 10 years ago. That was, and then the operating expenses contributed to that. So those numbers are high because the amount of debt payments that were being made contributed or combined with a lower operating expense number back then as well, made those percentages much higher in 12, 13, and even 15 a little bit too. But those have trended down and are fairly consistent over the past five years or so.
Contrast would be that we're at 7.13%, where the United States government is $37 trillion in debt versus $5 trillion in operating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're in good shape.
Problematic. Hopefully we don't get there.
We're teetering. My question is for Jennifer, for you, Justin, is there a industry standard for that percentage, that ratio? Is this lower is better? Where's it coming from?
We're paying with cheaper money.
Right. I mean, honestly, I don't know of off the top of my head what you would consider what a industry standard would be, to be honest with you. There's a lot of different things that could come into play here, because there are obviously times where you could have a much higher, you could have higher debt if you are, well, no, I'm saying that wrong. I guess there's just a lot of different factors, and I don't really have a good answer for you in terms of what would be considered a normal range compared to other districts. I can tell you 7's pretty low. I mean, that's good, but
This is a very low amount of debt. When you're taking on debt as a public agency, you really have to take into consideration your kind of 10-year expenditure plan, but also the value of revenue you can make from your existing cash being invested on the market. And so, for example, we're going to start talking about Scott Flat Spillway. We're talking about the Chicago Park Rewind. And although we do have sufficient cash to likely pay for those projects, there may be some value in bonding for those projects instead, which would then increase our debt ratio when compared to our operating expenditures. But when we get into those conversations, we'll pull in our PFM, our investment managers. We also have bond advisors, and then we'll start pulling all those numbers together to make the best long-term decision for the district. So all of these metrics and tables are included in the audit. They're all valuable pieces of the puzzle. Not one of them tells you the entire story.
We're in great position though.
Mm-hmm.
For all options.
Our debt is extremely low, so I'm not overly concerned at all about our level of debt right now.
Other questions?
Well done.
Would any member of the public like to comment or ask a question about the audit as presented? For the receive and file today, this is not, no action to be taken. All right, seeing none. No further questions or comments. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jennifer.
my,
We need to
Thank you,
move
staff.
Okay.
Items workshop, item 6A. For the public, that our workshop protocol is less formal than regular business. We'll take comment or questions throughout the presentation or the discussion. And we're receiving input today to make changes to the rules and regs. Good morning, Chip. How are you?
Good morning, very good, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. President Beerwagen, I'd like to defer this item to Aurora, our resident customer service expert, and the one who will be able to best describe and answer all your questions on this.
Morning, Aurora.
Good morning.
Welcome. Go ahead.
So we are here today to review and receive input on proposed changes to District Rules and Regulations, Section 6.01, terms of payment. And these changes are specific to treated water customers and those annual raw water customers who are billed monthly, most often in-home users. Basically, we're proposing three changes. The first would extend the due date or delinquency date, which is currently 10 days after statement issuance, to 25 days after statement issuance. We've heard from many customers that having such a short turnaround is frustrating for them, so we think they'll be pleased with this change. In doing so, that also extends the amount of time before a customer would be subject to turn off for non-payment. So that would be 90 days from statement issuance before they would be turned off. In addition, we recommend eliminating the hand delivery of a final turn-off notification to the property. There are many concerns related to staff safety with delivering turn-off notices to the door. As I'm sure you know, there can be bad actors out there, aggressive animals, and in a day, a customer service technician can be making 100 or more stops. So they're getting in and out of the truck, they're stopping in traffic, and so eliminating that really increases safety to our technicians.
100 stops, turn-offs, is this just in general?
Notifications, that's the step before they actually get turned off,
really?
is delivering a final notice. Yeah, in some cases.
And sometimes that's probably a little bit low.
Really?
That will be the most contentious portion of the proposed changes before the board. There are many individuals that will actually rely on the door tag to pay their bill. And it's very costly to do door tagging, not just for the reasons that Aurora just stated. It does take just a lot of physical staff time, but it's also a lot of hand staff time because they have to route the placement of the door tags. So, and create the door tags, route the door tags, then send someone out, then go put them on. And it'll be a little, if the board were to approve this, it will be a little bit of chaos for the first few months because there are folks who rely on the door tag to pay their bills. They just don't pay their bills.
And the wind comes up and blows it off the door.
Oh,
right?
it's
But-
dogs and it's that and it's
Okay.
mad people and it's traffic and it's getting in and out of vehicles.
Newspaper notifications can take that place?
Yeah, that's my question. How are you gonna, what are you gonna do instead?
No,
Other irrigation districts?
letters.
A
We're
letter?
not putting it in the newspaper.
Okay.
So the customers would receive a notice on subsequent bills that their bill is delinquent and may be
Other
subject to
irrigation
turn off.
districts do.
And then, 55 days after statement issuance, they would receive a final notice in the mail. And that notice would let them know that if they need to contact customer service to either make arrangements for payment or make payment prior to the 90-day due date in order to avoid turn-off.
And would that go to both the owner of the property and, if say someone's renting the property?
It does. So Senate Bill 998 requires that we send notification to both the person on file, the board of water bill, and if that person is not receiving mail at the property, we have to send a duplicate copy to the property addressed to occupant. If that copy is returned from the post office as undeliverable, then we would be required to hand deliver notification. So there would be a few instances where it would still be required and we would do that, but we would really be scaling it back.
So you said 55 days before you would tell them you're gonna be shut off, 55 days in the future?
55 days after bill issuance. So just as an example, we billed one section of our customers yesterday. So their bill would be due on December 2nd. On December 6th, they would see a penalty for that delinquent balance if it's not paid. On January 2nd, we would mail out that final notice. And then on February 8th, they would actually be potentially disconnected from us.
So they have plenty of time for the final notice.
And, or isn't it true that in that time period, they're also getting other bills? So
Correct.
they're also seeing their past due
No,
amount
like-
multiple times.
Just like a PG bill.
Right.
They would receive two statements after this initial statement, and a third one would be mailed out shortly after turn off.
So You had me when you said safety. I mean, I can imagine what's going out there, but, so, how much does this cost the district to do it the way we're doing it now?
So we charge $11 for every notification, which volume-based is covering the district's costs. But we start this process at 3 o'clock the day before we do deliveries. So that includes printing, going through every delivery notice and looking at every single account to see if the customer's made contact, to make a payment arrangement. And then, as Jennifer said, putting them in order so that we're working in a logical sequence. And then a full day of work for 1 or 2 technicians to deliver all the notices. And just for reference, I was speaking with one of our technicians who's been bit by a dog multiple times. She's been fortunate that it's never broken the skin, but, you know, she's had bruises and in her car and had dogs charged towards her. And
We just can't keep putting them in that position.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Director Heck, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering if, because I understand this is going to be a huge change for our customer base. And as you said, Jennifer, some people wait to pay their bill till they get the notice on the door handle. What if we also put, you know, for the next 2 months or something in red on our website, you know, note change, you will no longer be receiving a door hanger. And then as part of our electronic media that we have been doing, our social media presence on Facebook and Nextdoor, NID is wanting to let everybody know we will no longer be delivering those notices by hand. You will only receive something in the mail, so that we kind of cover all those bases in addition to the letters that they get directly, but so that people will start talking, oh, and NID is not going to put their door hanger on anymore. I just think it's a good way to get a broader message out that we're not going to do it anymore.
I also intend to put in a bill insert with all the bills effective as if it were to be approved. We would include that with the courtesy reminder that's already going out in the mail. And then we would make sure that we're verbalizing that to customers when they're calling in to make a payment arrangement or discuss their bill, so that they're well aware. We would use every opportunity to make sure they know you're not going to get that notice. Instead, you're going to get a pink notice in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
I like the direction.
Yeah, me too.
A couple months ago, I got an email with you and Chip from a customer who was complaining about that very issue of the 10-day period to pay. And so I really appreciate that you took that feedback as well as other feedback, I'm sure, to heart and said, what can we do differently? And are proposing this change, which I fully support across the board. Thank you for doing that.
Okay. So do you have direction?
We do, so we will bring this back for formal voting by the board, and then at probably the next meeting. And thank you so much for our great work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, is there any public comment?
Nope. I thought we did that.
On this item, revision of the rules and regs concerning final notice, turn off notice, I'm sorry. Start on your phone, come to the podium. All right.
It's a fair policy.
Mm-hmm.
Laura? Right. Next item is general manager's report.
I just have a couple of very brief items. Really exciting to announce that, what was the CFS we hit at Hemphill, Doug?
It's about 150.
150, we're looking good, yeah, so.
That's all
That
natural
is
flow.
so great.
Mhm. Yeah.
Did any of the rocks move around?
No, it looks pretty good.
It looks pretty
I
good.
can't say, but it wasn't showing it when they were moving around.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, huge thanks to Doug and Tanya, as well as Tony, who's been out there, inspecting the job this whole time. And then Chip, did you want to give a brief water on this last storm, or do you want me to do it? I do have the email.
Well, I can give you a real quick rundown.
He took his sock off again.
I did, my rain
Yeah.
dance really starting to kick in.
So we did have very good precipitation numbers this last event. Unfortunately, we don't have an automated snow pillow site that we can tell you in real time what's going on. However, we rely on other agencies that have these facilities, and specifically PG&E has a snow pillow up at the Mental League facility, and unfortunately it went out because of the storm. Up until the storm got really hot and heavy, it was already reading 30 inches of snow. So we got more than that, obviously. Our own indications are we're at more than 4 inches of water content in the snow that's there, and we are sending a crew up to get some real-time numbers up at the Bowman reporting station. So all really good news. Really cold storms for this time of year, which is really unusual. I lost a couple of trees in my house, unfortunately, because they hadn't lost their leaves yet, and they weren't used to snow, but I'll take it anyway. It's good stuff. We ended the year at 177,000 acre feet of carryover storage, which is phenomenal, 109% of average. So really, all in all, we're doing really well and set up well for next year.
And winter water is going to come out of natural flow.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Winter water will primarily come out of natural flow.
Yes, you know, it really hasn't started in exuberance yet. Really, that first storm just soaked up. This one should start kicking in some natural flows in the creeks, and yes, where it's available, where water rights allow, we'll start diverting.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chip.
Good report, Jim.
Thank you, Jennifer. Board of Directors reports. Who wants to go first?
This is Ricky. I'll go first. Okay. I too just wanted to acknowledge Laura. Now, can you guys hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Oh, okay, great. So, you know, Laura, what I wanted to say to you was that in reflecting on this last 4 years of your service to NID, I just hope that as you leave, that you are proud of these accomplishments and changes that you have played a significant part in. I'm not going to be able to remember all of them, much like Tracy said, but many changes for the better happened during your years. And I really appreciate your steadfast, almost stubborn, but steadfast leadership on the Hemp Hill project. That project is a permanent change in our watershed, in the lives of the fish, and an overall improvement to the environment of Auburn Ravine. You should feel very proud of that, and I hope you will visit it often and take pride in your part that you played in making that happen. You know, you also played a really big role in some policy changes that will positively impact NID for many years to come. You helped in keeping the organization stable during the departure of Rem, which I really appreciated because I was chair at that time. And you were a critical supporter in bringing in Jennifer. I'm personally sad to lose your wisdom and your experience on our board. And I really hope with all my heart that you'll find satisfaction in your next adventure and take a lot of pride in the work that you have done and given to NID. So thank you. And that is my comment.
Director Heck? Director
Yeah,
Johnson?
just to echo what Ricky said, and Laura, you put your heart and soul into it. And that's commendable. But I do have a report.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So, last Monday, met with Melinda Booth and Aaron, the river monitor, and Gianna Policy, and then 3 circle directors, George, Peter, and Kurt, came out to the farm we had a 3-hour just sit down and walk the farm, see the wildlife habitat, you know, how we try to be good stewards of the watershed and everything. Also joining was Reed Hamilton and Jean Mays from the Climate Energy, or the Energy Action Committee from the county, and they're also looking to form a Climate Transformation Alliance here in Western Nevada County. A lot of questions at the end of our 3-hour meeting, and we need to have further conversation on. And so I emailed Melinda asking if Karen, I, and Jennifer or Chip, we can present to the Circle Board And I don't see any time available until March. So we'll see, but in talking with Melinda, we want to continue that conversation. Because it's a critical conversation that we understand them, they understand us. And that's the basis of it. Then Jean and Reed, and joint with Eric Jorgensen, we met on Friday. And they're looking to form that Climate Transformation Alliance and wanted to see how NID could play into that, what role. And it was just about an hour and a half, and we just informal ideas of what their goal is, what the county's goal is, and basically we'll get something on paper, hand it over to Jennifer, and get that going, because it's I'm finding out that we need to explain ourselves better, what our role is, what we can and cannot do, what by legally we need to do to adhere to the state laws. It's important. Also, I just want to...
Excuse me, Rich, what group was that you were talking about? Was it climate?
In Truckee, they formed a Climate Transformation Alliance, and they're concentrating on carbon emissions, but when when we met Friday, everybody had to agree, 2020 emitted 140 million tons of carbon due to the fires, and it raced by double all the previous basically 20 years of emission controls. It just, so fire protection.
These were just members of the public, or who is this alliance?
Eric Jorgensen, no, the alliance is up there at Truckee. They're trying to form one here, so it's Reed Hamilton, John Mays, who's now in Uganda, and Eric Jorgensen.
Okay, so it's an organization, like a nonprofit, or is it?
Well, they're gonna form that. Yeah, they want to form that with a mission statement and strategic plan and everything. But they're also, Reed and John are part of the county energy action. So it was a good time to say, hey, we're producing enough energy for 60,000 homes by hydro.
Reed and them are county employees?
No, they're not. They're private.
Okay.
So when Karen and I and Chip went to Lake Wildwood, Jeff Hazer came and asked for support for a project that they have, and it's the infrastructure and evacuation project, but they want to have a shaded fuel thing to this around our water treatment plant in Lake Wildwood, all the way to the east, all the way to the south, just for protection, and hand that off to Greg. And here's the letter. It is so well written. I mean, this is Tom Cross goes, whoa, yeah, that's the support we really love. And so we're partnering with Lake Wildwood Association and see if they can get that grant money. And well, one more thing. I had a conversation with someone last night, an ex-forester. So, well, why did you quit? Because we were talking the other meeting how private land seems to be so much better managed than some of the Forest Service land or public lands up in the checkerboard up here. And he said, well, I quit because timber harvest plans went from 18 pages to 400 and some. The technology was the same, the science was the same, and he said, but I'm not going to fill those pages out. And he quit. And I said, well, how come the Forest Service isn't doing the work? He said, every time they try to do something, they're sued. Stopped. So I always thought Forest Service didn't have a will to manage those lands, but maybe they do, and they just get sued every time they try. But the problem is we have a lot of Forest Service lands, and they're not managed well. And the bark beetle infestation is horrible. Right, that's my report.
Director Johnson, Director Holt.
So, Laura, I also wanted to acknowledge your contributions to the district, and not to repeat Ricky's wonderful words, but there are a lot of things that you brought to the district that I think are special and valuable. Your detail orientation, your insights into issues, and really help to, I think, expand our conversation and understanding of options and opportunities that we have. In addition to the specific issues that Ricky raised, I think one that comes to my mind was the rate discussion. And I really think that it was your prodding and leadership that had the district expand the look at rates beyond what the initial focus was. And I think that wouldn't have happened without you. I think that I think there's no question, your heart has always been in the right place when it comes to the district, that you wanted it to be successful, that you still want it to be successful, and you always will. And I thank you for that. The only thing I'm doing, outreach point of view, is I'm going to the Nevada County Farm Bureau dinner.
And the food menu is outrageous.
Is it?
Yes.
Should be this year.
Cool.
All right, thank you, Director Hull. And I have the same report as Director Hull, so I did everything, Laura, that they've said already, and wish you well on future endeavors. I should be joining the farmer dinner.
Yeah.
Right, that we will take public comment.
Can I get a report?
Pardon me? I'm sorry.
I don't have much to report. I do want to say it's been a pleasure. I've learned a tremendous amount about this district that I had no idea coming into it. And it's been a real eye-opener. I've had some good times. I've had some very stressful times. But one of the handheld by far is my happiest achievement. I think it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to change that whole watershed. And so I'm going to continue to work on that Autumn Ravine. It's right in my backyard. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But I'm also most happy to hear that in the 2022 CIP that we're actually going to start looking at volumetric measurements of our canal system. Because we can't manage what we can't measure. And until we know, we need to start picking that low-hanging fruit. Try and measure what we can. Start with the pump account. Start with the easy things. Just let's start measuring how much water we're sending. And trying to, because once we know, until we know that, we're shooting stuff. So I'm very pleased to see that there is that you are looking at automating some of the head gates, and I just wish you guys all the best. I'm always going to be a customer, and so I might be gone, but I'm not gone. So, thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry I missed you. Okay. Next, we'll take public comment for items that are going to be considered in closed session. If you'd like to comment at this time, start on your phone, come to the podium.
I do not expect any reportable action.
Okay. No reportable action is expected. All right, seeing none, now we will close the open session and open the closed session.